Welcome to Recruiting is No Joke. I'm your host, Joe Laugi. It is great to be here with you guys. We have a special guest today because you're a returning guest. So, Tannum, welcome to the show. Remind me, when did we do our last show? Was that RecFest,
Yes.
a year ago?
RecFest a year ago in Nashville.
I'm pretty sure that was episode 2 where there was like a rainstorm outside. Yeah. Did something blow away in our session, or was that someone else's?
It was our session. I think the entire tent that we were in was halfway gone. So
that was amazing. Yes, anyone who has gone to RecFest, which is Recruiter Fest, which for anyone outside of the recruiting industry probably sounds really lame because it's just like a recruiter party, or it sounds like there'd be a lot of ghosting going on. It's actually a great event, very like festival style. And last year it was kind of sad because it was just like the scheduled time that they had it coincided with like crazy storms they were having, and we all kind of knew it was going to storm because obviously we have the weather forecast, so we're all kind of like, oh, this really sucks. But it kind of made it memorable. So
it did.
So good.
It did. It was a blast.
It was a blast. And we, luckily in this type of recording, I guess the internet could go out. That's happened before, but, we're not going to have any kind of crazy weather to deal with. So that's good. Well, a lot has changed since we last talked, even though it was a year ago, which I feel like today, like when things are like a year's gone by, it feels like a decade because there's always so much stuff going on. But you've got some big changes. So tell us what is new in your world. What are you up to?
Yeah, so a lot has happened since we last spoke, but I'm at a new company. I'm at a company called RentSpree. We're a property tech startup, and I am their people experience and culture senior manager. And when we last spoke, my focus was more so employer branding and with some sprinkled in employee engagement. But here at RentSpree, there is some employer branding sprinkled in still, so I'm still in the talent acquisition world. Yeah. They can't get rid of me quite yet, but there's definitely more of a focus on internal engagement, internal communications, and all that good stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, I love it. I've been hearing a lot recently about how just across the board, employee engagement is at an all-time low. Is actually what I've read recently. And like comparing it to, kind of similar levels to what we saw during the pandemic in terms of employee engagement. I'm curious, in your role, obviously, employee experience and engagement, you're probably tracking a lot of what's going on, but be curious to know if that's, just kind of your thoughts on that in general and why you think companies are experiencing this. In this current time, and then love to kind of know, like in your role, what are some of the things you're doing to, bring up that engagement and to keep people engaged in their roles?
Yeah. So I think I might have an interesting perspective on this because I actually started in employer branding and employee engagement during the pandemic. So I started this version of journey in my career in 2020. So prior to that, I was on the business side. I was on reputation management, but that's included some social media management as well.
For like candidates that are looking to work, would have been looking to work at your company.
Exactly. Well, before that, it was like the customer side. So customers would leave reviews, I would respond to reviews. And then that kind of started translating into the candidate experience. So I started managing the Glassdoor and Indeed. And my manager at that time, who is my manager now, I've come full circle, Kevin Frank, he's amazing. And I was very lucky to have such a supportive team that let me start doing that full time. So the employer branding, employee engagement full time. But yeah.
Shout out to Kevin then. I mean, come on.
Shout out.
Good leader to follow.
Kevin.
That's awesome.
Absolutely. Yeah. So it's interesting. I've only known employer branding and employee engagement during the pandemic. So I think employee engagement might be lower than it has been in the past. And I'm going to sound like a broken record with everyone else who speaks on this, but we were in person for decades.
Yeah.
For as long as we've worked. So this is an entirely new ball game. Like boosting and nurturing employee engagement in remote settings, we're relearning what it means to be engaged as employees.
Yeah.
We're redefining what it means to work. Like, all that being said, some things I do that I've done throughout my career as an employee engagement, specialist and manager, I try to do things differently. People don't really want to do the same things over and over again. Like, oh great, another game night that I'm forced to be a part of. Awesome. Like, they don't want that. And I think, having been on the business side, outside of, people and culture and HR, I think I have an idea of what, well, I like to think I have an idea of what employees actually want. So I do things a bit differently. Like, instead of just a bingo night, let's drag queen bingo night. Virtual. We just did that last week. It was a blast. It's just different. It's a bit more fun. When we do have in-person events, again, if it's not just another game night, it's a game night hosted by one of our employees who's so enthusiastic about this game, and they bring life to it. So just, I think, making things a bit more personalized and more tailored to what employees actually want, it's going to move the needle more than employee engagement initiatives have in the past.
How much of your role then is actually listening to what employees are saying, and have you found effective ways to do that? Because I just think of, obviously, surveys come to mind, but I feel like people are somewhat surveyed out, or people don't even necessarily trust surveys. So, or they just, you get that survey in, it's like 5, 5, 5, 5, 5. You're not really reading it, or you're not engaged in it. So, what advice do you have for people in terms of really figuring out what people actually want in events, and how do you measure that objectively as well?
Yeah. So survey fatigue is so real, so real. I really try to avoid them as much as I possibly can in terms of my work. So some things that I do to really have a pulse on what employees want, I will die on this hill. As a people experience and culture senior manager, I can't build or nurture a culture from the sidelines. When we're in this HR people and culture bubble, it's easy to stay in that bubble.
Yeah.
But similar to, I often, and I'm not trying to dehumanize this at all, but I see our employees as my customers. So as our employees are working with their customers, I'm working with employees as my customers. So I need to fully understand their day-to-day. I need to understand their work. Some things that I do personally, when I see meetings come through that our teams are hosting on the business side. So, for example, our user experience team just held a research insights meeting, sharing what they've found about our customer base. I join those meetings. It's not affecting my, people and culture lens, but I need to understand what's affecting them. So learning about their day-to-day. And even, this was 2 weeks ago now, we have an initiative at RentSpree called Renew, and that stands for Real Estate Network of Empowered Women. So it's a community for real estate agents and folks in that industry who are women. It's a community, it's a support group, it's networking. And our marketing team asked me to go to one of their events, and I thought that was really neat. And as someone who's on the HR team, again, it's easy to be siloed and well, that's not technically in my job description. I'm not going to go. I went. I want to learn more about our customers and what our employees are experiencing and what our marketing team does on a daily basis. So really just immersing myself in their world helps me understand what they want, I think. And culture is shaped by context, I think. If I don't understand their day-to-day, I can't help shape that culture.
Makes a ton of sense. I've been thinking about this a lot more too, even just from a recruitment lens, and really even just within recruitment, whether you're in HR, marketing, finance, accounting, really every area of business. I think we're in a day and age where you just have to understand the business you're working in. Yeah. And it almost I feel like there was a time where it was a lot more siloed. So even with, you can have sales doing their own thing, marketing doing their own thing, even though they're supposed to be working with the sales team. But it was it's like everybody's kind of individualized, but maybe it's because of AI and automation and just how fast things are moving. Mm-hmm. really feel like you have to know the businesses that you're working in, and like how you're impacting them and how your work is impacting it, and how, if you're dealing with recruitment, for example, like how are the roles that you're working on actually impacting the business? And it seems like more and more, at least from hiring managers that I talk to, hiring leaders, that they're in search of people who not only can do a job, but people who know the business and know how to impact the business by doing their job. And so,
Absolutely.
so yeah, I love that example. And also, it reminds me of I've done a decent amount of recruitment in the manufacturing space, and
Mhm.
there's like two different types of plant managers you can have. You can have the plant manager that's like in the office, kind of just doing all of
Yeah.
like the work, and then you have like the plant managers that do some of that office work and like are obviously keeping up to date with that, but they're also spending time on the floor, like getting to know, the people in the business, because it's so huge. And so I love that, like you're involved, like not just even from a silo, just like talking to employees, but you're going to meetings, going to events. I love that. One of the things you mentioned was this redefining of work as well, which I think seems to be, at least from my perspective, causing a lot of issues within the workforce right now, because we've got, what, four generations in the workspace.
Mhm.
You have one generation that was, it just seemed like work hard, work lots of hours, work in an office, and just show up, loyalty. And then on the flip side, we've got a generation which is like, yeah, I want to do things my way. I want to be flexible. I want to work smarter, not harder. So when you're looking at like redefining work, what are some of those big changes that you've seen? And what do we mean by that? And like how does this impact how you recruit, hire, motivate, engage employees?
Yeah, I've seen that personally too. I feel like I'm on the cusp of like of two different generations. So I think I still personally have like my like parents' work ethic where I will like work myself to the bone and burn myself out really quick. But then I have friends who are able to set those boundaries and understand what they want out of work. So it's very very interesting. So some things that I've seen or I try to instill in when I create these programs and initiatives, it's finding something that all of those ideologies have in common. And I think when you ask that question, the first thing that comes to mind is autonomy. I think thinking of what different generations, how they operate and how they want to work, all generations want autonomy. I don't think anyone wants, a micromanaging. And also, this is might be turning into a bit of a therapy session.
I love
But
therapy sessions. So
great. Me too. Me too. Um, I I often go back to what I can control. So what can we as individuals control? I can't control how different generations operate. I can't control how different departments operate. So I think focusing on what I can control as the culture leader, or one of the culture leaders, if you will. So I think when it comes to like communication comes to mind, autonomy comes to mind. I think all of everyone, no matter what background, no matter what generation you're a part of, you want to feel that your boss believes in you and trusts in you and
yeah.
lets you do your best work. And I think everyone wants clear and succinct communication. I think finding those commonalities amongst everyone is just going to be how we move forward and how we measure success moving forward, rather than catering to all these different types of people and different communication styles. I just think finding what we have in common, it helps move the needle.
Yeah, I love that. I think autonomy is definitely a big one, right? And that kind of I think what I've seen is there's more desire for flexibility,
Hmm.
flexibility in how you do work, when you get work done, where you get work done, which, people then can boil that down to remote work versus in office. But even in office, people want. I just talked to a leader recently that said, like in her role, there's flexibility to be able to do things, but it's always
Yeah.
under the context of if the results are there, right? Like if you're a
Yeah.
top performer, if you're getting the results, if you can step back and take a look and go, hey, I'm meeting all of the performance objectives, I'm adding value, I'm over exceeding, I'm adding value to the business. Once that happens for a while, then you get trust, and then with trust,
Yes.
a lot of these things kind of work themselves out, and that doesn't get talked about a lot. And so I think sometimes there's an idea of, all right, when I start an organization, I should just get all of this stuff. But I think realistically, like it's always based on trust. So I think the autonomy piece is big. Another thing you mentioned is, and you've mentioned it a couple times, is this idea of culture as well. So you're at a startup. So talk to me about what is culture really like at a startup. And obviously a lot of people, I don't know, they romanticize like tech and startup culture from the outside. And one of the things I get a lot from job seekers in particular is, I want to break into tech. I want to work at a startup. Like there's an idea that they have of what that work would be like. But talk to me about in terms of like what the culture is actually like, and what type of people do well in the environment, and maybe on the flip side, what are some of the things that you would be asking people if they were looking to get into that type of environment and they haven't been there before? Like what would they need to know?
Ooh, that's a great question. So, having been at a few startups, I will say it's not for the faint of heart. It's really not. I'm going to sound a bit cheesy, but a startup environment is so special, and I think if it works for you, it's great. Like I would not choose to be anywhere else, because I've also worked at corporate entities that have been around for decades. So
Yeah.
I've seen both sides, but there's some special energy in the culture of a startup that I think is like addictive almost. And at RentSpree specifically, it's this culture of like anything is achievable. If I have an idea, I can run with it. Let me figure it out. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work, and we don't pursue it. But I think there's just something so intoxicating about feeling like you're an owner, being an owner, even in some entities. It's that mindset of like anything is possible. And that might sound kind of cheesy, but I think when you work in settings where processes are already established, and
Yeah.
if you go out of that process, you get a little hand slap or you're in trouble, And so I think
Or
when
you
you're
try and get something done and it takes
forever.
years instead of taking
Yes.
weeks.
Yeah. When I worked in corporate settings, honestly, I don't think I ever had like an original thought or an original idea. I was just like, okay, I'll do what I need to do. I'll do X, Y, and Z as stated in this procedure. But in a corporate setting, and specifically at RentSpree, there is this feeling of, oh, I have this idea. I'm going to run with it, and I'll tell the people who need to know about it. But if it doesn't work, it doesn't work, and I can learn from that mistake. And that's really embedded in our guiding principles as well. And I think, as a job seeker, going back to your second part of the question, as a job seeker, guiding, and this might be my little HR hat, but guiding principles and values might seem like buzzwords. Some companies do use buzzwords. I don't think RentSpree does. But I think those are really, I think candidates shouldn't just glance over those guiding principles. Like those are commitments to you as a job seeker and as an employee from the company.
Mm.
And I think when candidates are looking for a job, read them. If those guiding principles resonate with you, apply. And if they don't apply, because it might not be, in your best environment for you to thrive in. They are commitments to you from the company. They are promises to you. I think.
Do you think sometimes people are just kind of not like tuned out to that, but there can be just mistrust that's been created because, for a lot of companies I've seen, they'll have like these values, they never talk about them. They're not really like, if you would ask employees like, hey, what are the guiding values and principles? A lot of them wouldn't know.
Yeah.
And then there's almost a sense that hey, we're doing this because like everybody does this and this is what you do, versus, hey, we're putting this actually, down on paper because we don't want to lose like the vision and the guiding mission. So are the questions that you would ask, I guess, for job seekers, like what are the questions you'd be asking to figure out how those values are actually being lived out?
Yeah. I mean, honestly, how you just phrased it just now, I think that could also be a great question for a candidate to ask. Is like going through the guiding principles and picking one and asking, how have you seen this guiding principle in action in your day to day? I think just point blank asking is so important. I think for companies who maybe don't live out, like to your point, maybe they just put it on paper. Okay, we check box, we created guiding principles. So maybe it'll catch some recruiters off guard when people ask about that. But for the companies that do embed it in their everyday, actually, like when I joined RentSpree, one of my first directives from my boss, Kevin Frank, shout out again, he like point blank, he told me, as the people experience person, and everything you do and everything you touch in every project and initiative include how this ties back to a guiding principle. Like, we're not just doing this for fun. Like, how is this initiative going to live out this guiding principle? So
That's cool.
for the companies who are doing it right, I think a candidate asking that question, it'll resonate with the companies who are doing it correctly. And I'm trying to think of like a few more questions that a candidate could ask to learn more about a guiding principle. And I know there's a lot of talk about AI, and
this would be a good use of AI.
It is.
Yeah.
I'll be honest, going into interviews, copy and paste the guiding principles into ChatGPT or whatever AI form that you prefer.
Yeah, I love that.
Have it and work with it to come up with questions that can really poke into the guiding principles and really uncover more around those guiding principles, and if they resonate with you, and if the company that you're applying for meets your threshold of those guiding principles, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense.
Yeah, work smarter, not harder. Like come up with those questions ahead of time. And as someone who's been on the recruiting side as well, in those asking the questions in the interviews, if you ask me about a guiding principle and show that you did the research and show that you actually care to make sure that this is a match, that's a win, in my opinion. I'd be very impressed by the fact that you did all that research. Because
it's still a huge thing that recruiters are saying in this market is, people are not showing up prepared to interviews, which sometimes I throw it back and I go, well, tough job market. If you're applying to lots of jobs, I can see where that happens. But at the same time, so I think someone in one of my previous episodes said it really well. It's like the way you do one thing is the way you do all things, right? So you make that assumption that, hey, if you're going to show up to an interview unprepared, you're probably going to show up to that business meeting unprepared, those client calls unprepared, those meetings unprepared. So that's why those things matter. And to your point, with all the tools we have nowadays and the technology we have, there really should be no excuse. I mean,
no.
You could literally just put anything. I mean, you don't even need ChatGPT. You just put it into Google, and it's going to pull up all the information with the little AI, Gemini on there now. So it's like you don't even have to click through anymore. I mean, it's really crazy time we live in.
Yeah.
I was going to ask you. You've mentioned working in a startup. Obviously, you've got these ideas you can execute. That's really awesome. What are maybe some of the more challenging aspects of working in a startup that, for some people might actually work really, really well, but maybe for some people wouldn't? Like, what are some of the kind of the things that people maybe don't talk about all the time?
Yeah.
What's the tough? Give us all the dirt.
The inside scoop. Yeah. I think with any startup, so while there is a lot of ambiguity that comes with a startup, and which even for some people, that would be a nightmare, by the way, right? Like not knowing what each day is going to look like can just be an absolute nightmare for some people. Exactly. And that's actually literally what I was going to like, truly. If my pro earlier of that ambiguity and of having that autonomy to run with an idea or run with a project might be really scary for some people. And if that's terrifying, maybe a startup is not right for you. And I actually think RentSpree has a really interesting startup culture because yes, there is that independence and autonomy to run with an idea, and there's that scrappiness, and people are wearing multiple hats. I think I have like 6 hats in my closet right now at RentSpree.
Perfect.
But at the same time, RentSpree does have a lot of documentation, so there is like some structure around that ambiguity. So I actually think it's like a great middle ground for people who prefer both. But I've also been a part of startups where there is nothing written. There is no documentation at all. Truly the wild, wild west. So, and honestly,
and in those environments, you're just writing the playbook as you go along.
As you go. As you go. And there's going to be failures and there's going to be pitfalls. And while, yes, that's always uncomfortable, I think failing is just uncomfortable, period. You learn from it. And I think, and I say all this not to scare anyone from a startup, because I thrive with structure, actually. I'm very much a type A person. I love a good calendar. I love a good schedule. But there is so much beauty in no days looking the same. I think I would lose my mind, even though I do love a good schedule. But I like
Was that
my
something
chaos.
you had to adjust to then initially? If it went against your kind of natural personality, is that something you had to adjust for, or you just were like, "Hey, I actually love this right from the get-go"?
Yeah, I absolutely had to adjust. It was such a learning curve for me, and I think giving yourself some grace and time to adjust to that learning curve is a part of the journey. Absolutely. Like growing up, like I often use this example. Like if my mom had to pick me up at like 3 p.m. from school and it was 3:05, I was like, Mom, you said 3 p.m.
That's
So
awesome.
yeah. So that's totally translated into who I am as an adult in the working world.
You did show up to time for the podcast, which
Thank you.
it rarely happens. So well done there.
I tried. I really tried.
That was good.
Yeah. So while I love that structure, I think, again, going back to my little quote from therapy, focusing on what I can control. So when you come into a startup environment, it's going to feel like chaos. There are days where it's like, oh my gosh, does anybody know what's happening? This is on fire. That's on fire. Let's figure it out together. And I think that chaos is beautiful. And if that chaos is like slightly structured, it's even better. And I think RentSpree does a great job of that. So yeah, there is adjustment there. And honestly, like for those who want to break into tech and for those who want to try a startup environment, I'm a very big believer in like just trying. Just try. You won't know unless you give it a go. Like apply and see, and if those guiding principles align with you, and if all works out, try. And that transition from a corporate world into a startup can be exciting. It's not always a bad thing.
Yeah, I love that. Because one of the thoughts I would have around startup and tech, and you talked about it a little bit before, was like this whole kind of burnout and like overworking, right? Obviously you're an employee experience, so you probably, this is probably top of mind of like, okay, how do we produce an environment where great work's being done? Obviously people are working hard. We're doing something big, right? We're dreaming big. We're here to win. We're here to do something great. We want people to put in their best work. How do you kind of create that environment, but then still avoid almost what I would consider like a class? Because in some ways I just think of like classic startup as like, hey, we're going to work like 80 to 100 hours a week. We're just going to burn out. And because that's what some CEOs out there are saying.
Yeah.
It's like, that's kind of like what people have also associated startup life with. So like, how do you create those boundaries? And is that something that's top of mind for you? Is that something that's top of mind for leaders? And how hard is that actually to put into play when you're in an environment that sometimes isn't as controlled?
So 2 things come to mind. That's a really good question. The first thing is leading by example. And the second thing,
I love that.
Oh,
That's
yeah.
so good.
Oh, it has to come from the top. If your manager is not taking time off, then
You
automatically, Yeah, you don't. Oh, I can't take time off then.
Yeah.
So definitely leading by example, and then the second is just normalizing,
Mm.
normalizing the rest and the recovery. Again, and that totally ties into leading by example. So something we really try to instill here at RentSpree specifically is that leading by example. Yes, we can shout into the void and send a Slack and send an email reminding people about our flexible time off. But unless leadership is doing it, like it's just going to fall and not be, utilized.
Yeah.
So really targeting managers and C-suite leaders, reminding them first, hey, have you taken time off?
Mm.
Actually, our HRIS system sends a really dramatic, I kind of love it. It's a really dramatic email that's like, hey, you haven't taken time off in 3 months. Are you good?
Burnout warning. Are you burning out right now? Yeah.
Literally,
That's awesome.
that's what it sends. So really, and just like, and again, I think that normalizes it too. If we have our HRIS system communication set up in place that reminds people to take this time off.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah. So seeing people take time off, seeing people rest and set those boundaries, or I think people at RentSpree are really good at this too. Like, yes, everyone's taking on so much work. We're a team of 132, I think, at this point, building so many things. Things are moving so fast, but team members are so good at like, I'm totally down to help you with this. Give me until next week. And I think setting those boundaries of timeframes and knowing their workload. And again, that also comes from leadership. Like leadership does the same. And I think leading by example absolutely is like the first step in normalizing those boundaries.
It's so huge. It's funny. I worked for a company, such a bank back in the day. They had this thing, which I have always thought was great because it was probably the only good thing about the culture working there. But they got in a bunch of trouble of like hazing people on the way in. But that's a whole yeah. So it's like you got that extreme side of it. But then they had this thing where it was like every few years, every year, you were required to have like this blackout time where literally you were locked out of the system like for 10 days or whatever. But it's because it's like, I think their rationale was like people need rest and they need to have that full time to unplug. And obviously like in banking, it was just like highly regulated. So like we would have audits on the bank and it was intense because it's like you got one signature initial sign wrong, like people were losing jobs over that stuff, and you're having to keep records for like 7 years, 8 years. So it was like, and I'm the worst at any type of like process or regulation, so I don't know how I lasted there. But I just always thought that idea of like, complete lockout, like you were just locked out of the system, like you didn't even have a choice. Like even if you tried to log on to like check an email, you couldn't because you were just locked out. And the reason that stuck with me is because I don't think that problem, that was 10 years ago I worked there, or maybe longer than that, maybe 11 years now. I don't think that problem has gotten better. In fact, I read recently that even people who go back to the office, right? There's an idea like, oh, if you go to the office, like you're in and you're out. I read recently that it's just thing of just like these 24-hour like work cycles that we're on. And whether it's because of Slack or Teams or just these constant messages, constant reminders, social media, it's like just having those solutions. But then again, ultimately, it's what leadership does, and that's what's going to drive it, right? Like it's if leadership is celebrating, and I've worked at some companies where leaders have posted about it, or they've been like, hey, I'm going on I remember one of my bosses was super cool. He's just like, yeah, I'm going on like a family road trip. And it was like celebrating that.
I love
and then
that.
as a worker, then you're like, as a worker bee, then you're like, all right, cool. If he's doing it, like I'm gonna do it too.
Absolutely.
It's cool. But it's still it's just so ingrained into like US work culture where it's like I just took someone yesterday who's got a job, who's got 1 week off for the whole year, and I'm just like, that's just insane. There's so little time. Like we're so bad at this.
So bad.
Ingrained.
It's a problem.
I guess what would be your advice, let's say, to someone else who's in a similar position as you, employee experience, or you're like a culture driver within the organization? Let's say you're in a position where leadership isn't as responsive as they are where you're at right now, and maybe you've been in those environments. Like, what's your advice for someone to kind of to try and get leadership on board with that, and for them to see the value for the actual whole employee engagement by leading with examples like that?
I think for folks who are driving culture elsewhere, and maybe there's not a whole lot of buy-in from leadership on leading by example, I think there is opportunity for education and speaking the language of the leadership team. I've always felt that's really important. And as someone who's like designated like cheerleader of a company, it's not always my first like language to speak in data and numbers. And that's something I've really had to hone in on and work on myself. It's probably not going to resonate with leadership like, hey, everyone, we should do X, Y, and Z because it results in X, Y, and Z. Like, great. So really, really speaking to leadership in their language. So again, going back to the education portion of this, our head of learning and organizational development at RentSpree just launched a leaders program and a mentorship program actually too. And it's a really special way of making leaders and reminding leaders that they hold importance at RentSpree, and the thing people are watching what they do. And so they meet pretty regularly, and she hosts educational webinars, if you will, and a lot of conversations happen in those meetings. So I think settings like that could be really a good first step for instilling leading by example and instilling that in our culture as well. So like educational programs, I think, are really like strategic ways of helping leadership see the importance of their role. And then again, going back to speaking their language, show them the numbers. Yeah.
What numbers would you look at for this? Like what numbers are you paying attention to? And like, what are the things that you look at in your role to go, yeah, you know what, we're creating a great culture here. What are some of those like basic numbers that you're kind of guided by?
Yeah, so RentSpree has a quarterly pulse survey. We really try to not overwhelm employees with more regular surveys, more regular than that. And they're fairly short. So again, not too overwhelming. Luckily, we do have an engagement survey, that pulse survey, where I can pull actual data from. So the numbers I'm looking at there are obviously the engagement numbers. Do employees, promote RentSpree outside of their day-to-day? Would they recommend RentSpree to another colleague? Do they have a good relationship with their manager? Just like the overall engagement data I'm looking at there. And then in addition to that, putting on my little employer brand hat, looking at how often employees are reposting content on the LinkedIn page. Our marketing team does a phenomenal job of our LinkedIn page, and they're I'm lucky enough to have to sprinkle in some employer branding posts there from time to time. So looking at how many people are reposting, what employees are reposting, and then as silly as this might sound, I live by Slack emoji reactions to my Slack communications. So seeing how many people are interacting with those posts drives a lot of my engagement activity as well. Seeing what works, whether it's video, text.
Super interesting. It's almost like emojis. It's like community management. I just think of if you start a community online, you're measuring what's the engagement actually in the community.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And of course, the numbers in terms of how many people are joining the all hands meetings and who's joining this drag queen bingo event or this, water cooler talk that we have weekly. So kind of tracking those numbers fairly, I do track them. But just seeing what's working, what's not working, super important. Yeah.
Yeah, it's huge. Again, it kind of goes back to what we were talking about before, where it's like this is the element of knowing the business, right, and
Yeah.
understanding. I know one of the things that's coming up a lot right now in the talent acquisition space, and is want a seat at the leadership table. I was like, great. Well, if you want a seat at the leadership table, then you have to be able to talk that language, which is
Yeah.
always data. What's the story? Ultimately, what's the ROI? And the better you can do that, the better you understand, the more you're going to be able to have a seat at the leadership table. And it's almost like, I think a lot of times, or at least what I've seen from TA, can be like ideas around stuff and like, oh, this would be a great idea, or we could do this. But unfortunately, when you're dealing with the CFO, CEO, COO, investors, a board, they want to know what's the actual data, what story is that telling, what's the impact to the business, and what are we going to do to change it. So
Yeah.
it's just like it's knowing the value you're bringing to the business at the end of the day,
Yeah.
which is huge. Well, look, I know we're at like 43 minutes there, so we're at the end. What I would encourage everyone to do is go back as well. It was a year ago we did the live podcast as well from the built-in booth. I would go check out that episode as well. But where can people connect with you? Where can people find out about RentSpree? Where's the best place to go?
Yeah. So my LinkedIn is my name, Tannum Sullivan. So you can follow me there. And for all things RentSpree is just RentSpree on LinkedIn and rentspree.com as well. We've also got an Instagram, Facebook, all that good stuff.
What about
We're
TikTok?
everywhere.
You on TikTok?
I do think we have a TikTok, actually, and
Good.
I will say RentSpree actually has a few podcasts of their own for like the Renew initiative that I mentioned earlier, and then our CEO has a Closing Time podcast as well. So big podcast team too.
Yeah, I think I was just doing a little bit of research before we hopped on, and there was a post on LinkedIn. I think you had reposted it from, I want to say your marketing director was on there talking about startup culture, which I thought was pretty cool.
Yeah, our leaders are really good at. I love it. They're really good at being active on LinkedIn, and which obviously helps our employer brand as well.
Yeah, helps everything.
Yeah, it does.
Content should be a non-negotiable these days, but I'm still having to twist people's arms. So, well, Tannum, so good to see you again. I'm excited to see what you're able to accomplish in new role with with RentSpree and what you have in the future. And guys, as always, if you've got questions for me, you can go to www.therealistrecruiter.com. If you want to get involved with the show, reach out to me, connect with me on LinkedIn. If you want to be a guest, you want to be a sponsor, I would love that. And for anyone who's made it to the end of the show, you are my true hero.
Thank you.
If anyone's listening right now, for all of you that are listening, you made it this far. This episode is for you. I say that every time, but it's so true. But Tannum, thank you so much again. So good to see you. And last question here: are you going to be at RecFest again? Are you planning on going?
I hope to. I had so much fun. It was the most fun I've ever had at a conference. So hopefully.
Yeah, it's a good time. So if you're interested in RecFest as well, hopefully we'll see you there, and then hopefully we'll get to see each other again there in real life. Be awesome. And we will see you guys next week with another great guest. And thanks so much for tuning in. See you guys.
Thank you.